Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl Ames.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner.
And this is Todd Nemet.
And we are going to have probably the longest album fight we've had yet. We've got the Kinks Lola versus Powerman and the Money Go Round against Clash the Clash. And it's their debut album. Todd, why did you pick these albums?
Well, I wanted to do the Clash. That was my first thought. And then I was thinking who would be good to go up against the Clash. And I feel like the Kinks were sort of the proto version of all this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Just with their attitude, with, slicing their speaker to get the sound they want. I felt like they were the proto-punks. I sort of flattered myself to think if I was around during the British invasion, I would have been a Kinks fan and not a Beatles fan, you know?
Yeah. Did it strike you how similar to the Beatles, the Kinks, like their sound was, and how the Kinks just kind of seemed to sound like a lot of other things and never really liked themselves? Did you get that vibe?
That's interesting. I never really thought of it that way. I think of the two of them, like Ray Davies and Lennon McCartney, being completely different styles of songwriters, having a sort of a different sound that they were trying to do different things. So I never really put the two of them together like that, but that's interesting.
And then introduce our guest.
Okay, so our guest judge today is Jeff Gedert, who hails from Toledo, Ohio, and is now living in Japan. I'm not exactly sure what city. We've been friends since high school, and he went to Berklee College of Music. He's been a big influence on the music I listen to, so it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say.
All right, well, let's...
Howdy, hi.
Hey, Jeff. All right, so
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Let's get Phil with his corner call. Phil, introduce our fighters, please.
This week's album fight is a scrappy 13-round brawl between two bands from the streets of London. In the red corner, we have a satirical concept of good versus evil from the Kinks with their 8th studio album from 1970, Lola versus the Powerman and the Money Go Round, Part 1. And their opponent in the blue corner, a key player in the early British punk rock scene, we have The Clash and their debut studio album from 1977, The Clash. Let's get ready to ramble. Take it away, judges.
Okay, I'm excited about that. And then let's go ahead and this is going to be a long fight, so let's get Richard's analysis right now. Richard, what's your pre-fight?
This week we have a battle of classic 70s British rock. One a debut album and the other a concept album from further along in a band's career. What does the patent-pending numbers process say about the Clash versus the Kinks, Lola versus Powerman, and the Money Go Round? Well, after inputting our 7 different criteria, the numbers came out very clear. The Clash took 6 of the 7 categories, only losing an album chart position. And given the fact that the Clash were new, and the Kinks were a popular established band when each of these albums came out, this really isn't a surprise that the Clash would have better chart position when that album came out. What was a surprise here is the Clash joins a very small club in album fights. It joins the 5-star review club with the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds and Joy Division's Closer. Every reviewing body I could find gave it a 5-star review or whatever their equivalent is. And while that doesn't make it unbeatable, it does create a problem for the Kinks. And add into that the fact that Lola is considered a concept album, which doesn't traditionally fare well in the album fight song v song format. I don't think Lola vs. Powerman stands much of a chance here at all, really. I think it's a decisive one. 8 rounds to 5 for the Clash. Now, if you're looking for strong rounds for each album, rounds 2, 5, and 8 are strong for the Kinks. Rounds 1, 4, and 12 for the Clash. Back to you guys. Let's see how the numbers come out today.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this fight, and it's interesting to hear the numbers. I can't wait to see how this goes out. I suppose, fellas, we ought to really just jump in because we do have 13 rounds, our longest fight yet to get through. So why don't you go ahead and get us going? So we're going to go round one, the contenders, that's apropos, versus Jenny Jones. Go ahead.
All right, so round one here. This is, the album fight starts off, and this is kind of a deceptive move by the Kinks. Looks like they're going for like a country song or a folk song, and then boom, they connect hard with a driving rocker. Didn't see that coming, but that was an expertly executed feint in boxing. But it's a solid start. It's a great track. I like the harmonica a lot. And what's interesting to me about this one is the drums feel like they are in half time compared to the other instruments. I think if the drums were playing twice as fast, this would be like complete thrashy punk, right on par with anything happening in 1977. And for the Clash, they come out with Janie Jones, named after a woman who ran a brothel. It's high energy. It's exciting right out of the gate. It's just a great song to start with. It's like to start an album with or to start a concert with. The only thing I noticed is that it's got this kind of list of in love with rock and roll, in love with this and this, in love with that. And that put me in mind of the Modern Lovers song, Roadrunner, which has got a similar vibe going on. So in terms of points, both sides come out swinging hard, just pummeling these 2-minute songs that will end up being the modus operandus for the rest of both albums. And I'm giving this one 10-9 to The Clash for naming their song after the UK's version of Heidi Fleiss.
That's great stuff. Great first round, and I love it. Todd, go ahead. How do you have round one?
Okay, I agree with everything that Jeff said. You can see now why Jeff influenced me a lot in the music I listen to. The one thing I want to point out about the Kinks with the contenders is that resonator guitar comes in immediately. This is the star of the album. And, it was bought for, I'm trying to think of, I thought I had it in my notes, like $150, I think, when he went in to go buy another Martin guitar. And this makes me think it's really interesting how sometimes like a cheap instrument can make the whole album, or make a band. Kind of like when that Whiskey Town thing, it begins with a pawn shop guitar he had to run out and buy because he left his guitar in the parking lot, or like Paul's Hofner bass, or the clavinet on Talking Book, right? So if you get the right instrument, it seems to really make the album. And I think this resonator guitar is great, and I love whenever it pops up. I think when I heard it on FM, I thought it was a banjo. I think because of all the compression, that they put on the signal. But when you hear it on Spotify or you hear it on the record, it sounds a lot better. Yeah. Janie Jones' iconic song, it goes right down drugs, sex, rock and roll, right? And everything about this song is great. I didn't understand the lyrics, so I got a Genius and I read down the lyrics. I'm like, oh, this song's even better. So I'm giving it 10-9 to The Clash.
Well, great to hear a Genius reference. I'm sure Mabu and the guys over at Everpedia will love that because I use Everpedia to look everything up. And Mabu was one of the founders of Genius. So nicely done on that, Todd. Thank you. For me, the contenders, there's a lot going on in the song. I know this is Ray, like I've got a bunch of ideas, and so he kind of jams them together, and the title indicates that because it just keeps going on and on because he couldn't decide what the album was. And this song brings to mind Robbie Roberts and Feel, and the Beatles, and the harmonica. All these things are great. And like you said, Jeff, it's just a great way to start an album. It rocks. It did, but the problem is it goes against Janie Jones, and this is a highly regarded song, and it's stripped down. It's not complex. It's right at you, and they come in for a fight. So I give this round to The Clash 10-9. Todd, let's do round two. Strangers versus Remote Control.
Okay, so I'm going to say right off the bat, Strangers is my favorite Kinks song. It's a Dave Davies song, and I don't know, there's just something about this song that really grabs me. When I was researching it, it's interesting that it kind of started from the Hank Williams line, "I'll never get out of this world alive." So it's kind of a play on that. I think is where the kernel of the song started, and it has this sense of wanting to plug into the spirituality kind of the 60s and the 70s, but for some reason the singer, the narrator can't quite trust that, so he puts his trust in friends and seeing friends. But then at the same time, it's a song about a friend who died of an OD. So it has layers like Shrek, but it's a very interesting song, and I love it. Remote Control is great. This song I never quite connected with. I was reading that the Clash were pissed that this got put out as a single anyway, but I'm going to give it 10-9 to the Kinks.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. The Remote Control song was put out by the label, like you said, and the Clash kind of disowned the song. So if they don't want to take ownership of it, then neither do I. And I'm going to give plenty of credit to Mick Jones and Paul Simon in later. So, yeah, for me, nice and short, Kinks 10-9, and it's just because if you're going to slip, Ray Davies is going to catch you. So this is a slip on the Clash's part. What do you think, Jeff?
What I think is the organ is what makes this solemn, and the reverb on the vocals is like what makes them really haunting, and it actually makes them a little bit hard to make out what he's saying, but that works well in this context. And from a music theory standpoint, without getting too geeky, there's a great chord change in there where it's an E major chord where you're expecting to hear an E minor chord, and that brings out the flat 6 note in the key, which is the secret ingredient to like all beautiful music. So I love that. That's fantastic. It. And the song was used to good effect in a Wes Anderson movie, which not everything in a Wes Anderson movie is. The Clash, it's okay, but it feels kind of unfocused compared to the other songs in the first several tracks here that kick off the album. There's several musical ideas that are interesting, but they don't quite, gel together like they do on other Clash songs. And it feels like we're taking a moment to slow things down a little bit. But we're only 2.5 minutes into a driving punk rock album. So it loses some of the steam and the immediacy of that. In terms of points, both sides are switching it up, and they're letting their main guitarist sing lead vocals, which is a risky proposition. It's shaping up to be a very interesting fight. And what's interesting, too, is both of the guitarists as vocalists are using double-tracked vocals. Mm-hmm. Whereas the first song on each album uses just the guitarist, just his pure voice. So it's a decisive blow for this round. For me, was the non-diatonic E major chord. So 10-9 for the Kinks.
Interesting. You mentioned the funereal sound, and I that bass drum at the end too has that same kind of dirge quality to it, just as it fades out.
Yeah, exactly. Almost not quite second line, but related to that maybe.
Yeah, I love what you talked about there. You're right. When the Clash get it right, it's obvious. This isn't them getting it right. And then there are some neat ideas that come through the Kinks. It's funny that we all agreed on this one. Let's move on to round 3. I'll kick us off. Denmark Street versus I'm So Bored with the USA. So Denmark Street, this is why Ray Davies is so widely regarded. Here's a song that's, it's not the biggest hit on this album even, but here it is, and he's a very powerful songwriter. And this Todd was where I think I hear a lot of his McCartney-esque tendencies to write very jingly kind of songs, and I mean this in the best way because they're super catchy. And he and McCartney kind of share that. There's a lot of things. I don't think the old-timey piano sounds and very clear Rocky Raccoon parallels will serve this song well. What the Clash do well when they don't let Mick Jones sing and Joe Strummer does is they're a lot more believable and angry. So here's what I love about I'm So Bored with the USA is it's as relevant today as it was 40 years ago. The lyric, because killers work 7 days a week, that's constant in our news feed. The Yankees and cop shows are always on TV. That's true too. If you watch ESPN, and goddamn how many cop shows are still on the, and it is. We are a bit boring when it comes to these things. When Joe is the social commentator, the Clash do better. Mick and Paul, again, do what they do great between them, the bass and the lead guitar. I think it's great. It's Clash 10-9. Go ahead and go, Jeff. What do you got?
Yeah, exactly what you were saying there, Pete, about the songwriting. It's just really, throughout the album, it's really great songwriting. And taking a bunch of different approaches and putting them together and making them work each time. It's really, it's a great thing. So yeah, this is, and he's dissing the music publishers here, but he's taking the music hall style angle to that. It's cynicism, but there's a lot of humor. It's short, it's concise, it goes right in for the attack, and the whole incident is over before you realize it. It's great. For I'm So Bored with the USA, they're talking about the pervasive American cultural influence, like you said. And from living in Japan for quite a while, I can tell you that's a valid point. Yeah, but it's a solid, high energy, great song. The album gets back its momentum with this one. Originally, this was written as "I'm So Bored with You," but then he changed it to "I'm So Bored with the USA." So that works really well here, but it wouldn't work in other songs. I was thinking about this. If it was "The USA has lost that loving feeling," or "The USA can't always get what the USA wants," or "I've never loved a man the way I love the USA." It just wouldn't work.
Jumpin' Jack USA.
The decisive blow for this round was the Clash lyric, "Suck on Kojak."
Yes.
10-9 in favor of the Kinks.
Love it. Todd, how did you have it?
Interesting. I like everything I heard. So Denmark Street, it feels a little bit tossed off, and like Jeff said, I think the wit is what saves it from just kind of absorbing up its own hole, you know. And there's the funny lyrics like, "I hate your music and your hair is too long," you know. So it has all these funny little lyrics, and it's not super melodic, and I didn't care for the bridge, and I don't like that, you know, like the ragtime piano. Nobody's going to rock out to that. So this is more of an FU, like, you know, a big portion of the album is FU to the music industry, right? And then you put it up against "I'm So Bored with the USA," which is iconic, it's classic, you know, a mishearing of "I'm So Bored of You and Me," and then they're like retrofitted the lyrics in there. And I think the Clash win this one easily, 10-9.
All right, let's moving right along. Let's go to round 4. Jeff, go ahead and kick us off. We're going to do "Get Back in Line" versus "White Riot."
Oh man, White Riot. But anyway, the Kinks, like Ray Davies is here dissing the music unions, and it goes back and forth between this kind of a dream pop and a country-like quality that's quite nice. I was also thinking, like, given like a lot of descending lines in this, I could really hear this as the last song on the album. It'd be a great kind of closing song. It's also interesting to note the sonic difference in the clarity of just 7 years when the Kinks were recording in like 1970 versus 1977, where multi-track recording in studios is the standard and they've got everything more isolated, and there's a clarity to it that it's surprising to hear that this is really albums only 7 years apart, but you hear the sonic difference. But the Clash, the White Riot, this is their first single, and it's a killer. It's the best song on the album. This is punk music in a nutshell. It's all of the kinetic energy of social discontent, and it's talking about racial issues and racial tension and fighting back against racist policing. So like today, that would be the Black Lives Matter movement. So it's the same issue. 50 years later, we're still dealing with that. And now I'm sad. So 10-9 to the Clash for making me sad.
Perfect. Just like that. Keep doing that right there. Todd, how did you have it?
I agree with Jeff on this. You know, "Get Back in Line" is interesting. I listened to it. Like, this is an anti-union song. You know, this is pretty interesting to hear. It reminded me my grandfather, who raised my dad, actually my great-grandfather who raised my dad, would tell me stories about it during the Depression, having to bring an apple to get a song to get a song to get work for that day, you know, bribe their way onto the work line. And, you know, and it's hard to compare that with being like a loose rock star. You know, it's a little bit disingenuous, I think. You know, the American Musicians Union did fuck with the Kinks pretty heavily, and, you know, kept them from really being a you know, massive success for 4 years. Who knows what would have happened? But I'm not quite sure if the analogy holds up, you know. And then you got White Riot, which is, you know, a riot that some of the Clash members got stuck in or caught up in, and I think it was a pickpocket. Somebody was arresting a pickpocket at a like Caribbean parade or something, and then it blew up into a massive riot that they got stuck into. And so this is great, you know, all the politics, the anger, everything, and like you said, this is sort of the, you know, platonic ideal of punk. So 10-9 for the Clash.
All right, So round 4 for me, yeah, Get Back. Both these songs are about a lack of control of one's own life or being and everything, and I always like when these accidents happen. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I've noticed in the Kinks albums is that sometimes when Ray writes the songs, they're of course beautiful, but the content of the lyric does not match the tenor of the song. And if that's on purpose, that's great. But it just seems like this song is too beautiful for the oppression that they're trying to sing about. So I didn't feel like they hit the mark with that. It's just the melody is wrong and it makes the song less believable. And then the other thing is they're going up against a band that well, at least Joe Strummer, who's singing, was squatting. You know, he's really singing directly from his songbook that he wrote during these hard times. And it's hard to match up with that when if you've got what I think is the wrong melody for your song. So this song, again, like you guys have said, this is, I use the 1%er conversation, you know, the Wall Street kind of fight back thing, but 40, 50 years later, it's still the same fight, still the same thing. So Joe has his finger on the pulse of a real social problem, and where a lot of rock and roll things explore different perceptions of love and everything, he's going through a range of different kinds of rage and anger against different machines. So I think it's fantastic. Obviously, this is iconic. You guys have said that. This for me is Clash 10-9. Round 5. Here's a good one. Todd, kick us off. Lola versus Hate and War.
Okay, Lola is the career-defining song, I think, for the Kinks. I think this is the one that everybody knows. It starts off with that great, dobro again, which I thought was a banjo. This is, I mean, who hasn't accidentally brought home a guy from a bar, And so I think it's kind of universal appeal in that respect, of course. And then Hate and War, I'm not crazy about this song. And the lyrics are even self-contradictory. He's like, I hate all the politeness. And then earlier he says, the only things we have today are hate and war. So which is it? If you take out the lyrics of this song, it just sounds very, very traditional, like a bar song, with the riffs after every line, and then a little guitar hook, a line, a guitar hook. It's a very, very traditional song. If you strip out the lyrics, it could be another band. But so I'm going to give this to Lola, and I think it's hands down.
Let me do my side now. Yeah, for me, round 5, like you said, Lola is probably their biggest song. It's so big that it's not even really rock and roll anymore. Like, it's just become the commercials, and it's just part of the fabric of our society. And I mean this in the best possible way. Like, it's transcended rock and roll, and it's hard to beat that. And when the Clash miss, it's a song like Hate and War. It's anthemic and everything, but they got a better anthem later on that comes out. So it's not even close for me. It's 10-8 Kinks. It's a knockdown round. Jeff?
Yeah, it's transcendent. I like that word. It's an iconic song. It's like the transgender Johnny Be Good or something. The whole thing. It's got the lyric substitution of Coca-Cola. They had to change it to Cherry Cola to avoid product placement laws for the BBC or restrictions or rules or something like that. I'm thinking about that, like the radio today, every other song you have is talking about Hennessy or Cristal. It's a different time. It's a different time. But yeah, it's got the resonator guitar or the dobro. I always thought it was called the dobro. Apparently that's a brand name, and it's actually a resonator guitar. Dobro's it's like Kleenex. Yeah. It's like the thing you see on the Dire Straits Brothers in Arms album cover. And like that guitar is the reason why every aspiring guitarist who's just looked up the chords to Lola and sits down to play it on their regular acoustic guitar frowns in disappointment when it doesn't sound the same.
That's great.
It's pretty easy. It's just C, D, E. It's pretty easy.
There we go. Those are my favorites. Yeah, the Clash, again, they're making the risky move here, letting their 6-string guitarist be their 2nd-string lead vocalist. Mick Jones, he's fine as a singer, but Joe Strummer, he could sing the phone book and it would sound like a protest song.
Yes.
If the iTunes user agreement was sung in Joe Strummer's voice, people would listen to it.
And get mad.
Not the greatest song though. So yeah, it's the Clash's Hate and War. It's fine and all, but it can't lay a finger on Lola. So knockdown Kinks 10-8.
Good call. You're smart.
Wow.
Thank you.
I think we're agreeing on everything, aren't we?
Oh, don't worry. It's all gonna sort itself out. Right?
Okay.
It always does. Round 6. What's my name versus Top of the Pops. So this is my round to start off. So I'll go ahead and go. My name. So what do I hear in this? I hear a lot of other bands being inspired by the Clash. Pennywise in general, the male chorus stuff that the Clash do so well. Pennywise has made a career doing, and it's just a fantastic thing. So again, we have a small man taking on the machine and What's My Name, and that's what Joe Strummer does. And when he sings about it, it's great punk rock. This is exactly what you want from a punk band. Top of the Pops. I think Mike Avery and Dave Davies stand out in this song. Mick notably sounds less like Ringo than he normally does. Here's my problem with the Kinks, guys. They're more they're kind of like Def Leppard, where sometimes they struggle between being emblematic and cliche. And sometimes here's what they don't do. They sound like the band. They sound like the Beatles. Sometimes they sound a little bit like the Stones, and they don't get away. They don't create space often enough. Yes, they do at times, but this is one of those songs where, like anybody else from that peer group, could have wrote and probably did write songs that are very similar. So I just think that the Clash here are separating themselves from the other bands and showing the way later down the road, whereas anybody who's following the Kinks in this song is probably also following the Beatles and the band and other bands from their era. So 10-9 Clash. How did you have it, Jeff?
The Kinks, Top of the Pops. My favorite part of the song is when it gets to your records just got to number 1, followed by the church organ at the end, which for me is kind of like the whole thesis of the album in that little nugget. Ray Davies is dissing the media. There's a melody that borrows an awful lot from Land of a Thousand Dances. That kind of stuck out to me. But there's the guitar playing from Dave Davies here. It's killing.
Yeah.
It's really outstanding. And it's one of those chord changes. It's like Louie Louie or Since You've Been Gone. And it also put me in mind of the theme song for the Freaks and Geeks TV show for some reason. It's really powerful, solid stuff. The Clash, they're singing about identity and alienation, and they leave it a little ambiguous. I think one reason that the Clash's lyrics hold up years later, or what the Clash holds up years later rather, is because their lyrics aren't, exactly what they're thinking, and they leave something up to the listener. They don't spell everything out for you, and I think that's a strong point. But in this case, Top of the Pops takes it 10-9 to the Kinks for worshiping the holy dollar.
Look, Todd wanted some disagreement. There you go. Right there. He wants it. We deliver.
So I agree with what you're both saying about the Kinks on this song, but I think it's deliberate. I think that they're trying to make a dopey riff, and they're, the first rhymes are very dopey. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, but it's like Moon and June kind of a rhyme. And so it sets up the song that's going up to the Pops is this dopey song with this dopey rhyme and this dopey riff. And I think that's all on purpose. It makes the song a little bit too fourth wall-y for my taste. And that the church organ, when the song reaches number 1, I think it breaks through the wall a little bit too much and takes me out of it. And so I'm supposed to stand next to Ray Davies and laugh at this whole machine or something when I'd rather just rock out. But parts of the song really, really rock and I think are great. The section at the end where he goes, now you can make some real money. Is that like a fake Liverpool accent that's going on? Is this some kind of a Beatles thing?
Maybe.
I don't know.
And I read X-Ray, the memoir by Ray Davies, and it's fantastic, and I highly recommend it. And the thing I remember most is that they had beef with the Beatles for sure, and they referred to Paul McCartney as "pull my cock off," which still makes me laugh. I'll walk down the street and think of this, and I'll still laugh at that joke for some reason. It's really, really funny to me. It's the perfect way to take the piss out of him. So anyway, love this song. Love the weird references. A little bit too fourth wall-y. What's My Name is a great song. I like the driving bass in the chorus. I like the way they sing. It's sort of emblematic of the way punk songs will touch on this topic later on in punk. I can't think of any specific examples. I really do like this song, but I'm giving it to the Kinks, just barely. 10-9.
All right. Let's get into round 7 then. This is going to be Money Go Round versus Deny. And boy, what a difference in these two songs. Jeff, kick us off.
Yeah, this is interesting. We might have a little difference of opinion on this one, but the Money Go Round, I love it. It's Ray Davies. He's dissing all these aspects, and now he's like dissing the accounts receivable department. It seems like it's the bouncy Kurt Vile like root fifth bump that I'm a fool for that. I just love it, and it's a good thing. Like Todd was saying this earlier, that there's so much humor on this album. If it were taking itself more seriously, it could get really whiny and annoying. But no, when his voice goes up and he says, "I thought they were my friends," I totally buy that. It sounds like he means it. Deny. It's, a song about a friend lying about their drug habit, reportedly about Clash co-founder Keith Levine, who actually wrote the previous song, What's My Name. It's got the lyrics, "I believe everything I read, what they've written in the Slutsville paper." So I don't know. I guess that in America, that might be the new Slutsville paper or something like that. But the whole Clash album is to societal discontent what Lola versus Powerman is to the music industry. It's this big sing-along songbook of injustices. I think the decisive blow in this round was Ray's extra strong American accent, where you just dig it in there, where he goes, "On the verge of a nervous breakdown." I'll give it 10-9 to the Kinks.
All right. That's great. Todd, what did you do?
Nice. The Money Go Round, what I wrote in my notes is George did this better in Only a Northern Song. And I think it's another great attack on the music industry. Obviously, the wit is there, hilarious lyrics. It's a little bit shocking. It calls out people by name, like Larry Page, who was one of their first managers, another manager. And it talks about the laws, about the way that UK publishing rights are handled and non-UK publishing rights are up in the air. And so it's interesting. It's sort of like cracking open your diary and actually saying things about people. And it has that funny line, "If I ever get my money, I'll be too old and gray to spend it." But it's a little bit like listening to a millionaire complain about capital gains tax rates or taking down the carried interest, hold over. So I'm docking it for that. Deny, I like a lot. It's a great, it's funny, like I was saying earlier before we started recording, you run out of adjectives like iconic, classic, influential, And this is one of those. It's a Clash song. What can you say? That fade out guitar solo is a little bit rock god-esque, like the sort of thing that they're getting away from. And this is where around the edges, the Clash will kind of betray themselves as I'm not saying they're not a punk band, but the other parts will come out where they're a rock band or they're a pub band or they're whatever, and that's part of the strength, obviously, is that they wear their influences a little bit heavier than other people. So I'm giving this to the Clash 10-9.
Yeah, the Clash definitely have a problem of breaking out a genre and making it hard for you to say they're just a straight up and down punk band. They definitely will grab a Caribbean vibe and go with that, and the lyric oftentimes is different. But this round is about Money Go Round versus Deny. So
this episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
This round is about Money Go Round versus Deny. So when I hear Ray Davies perform, he sounds like so many other people, and I can't decide if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Here I hear a lot of Randy Newman, and again, the tone and the tenor of the song doesn't seem to match his pointed lyric where he's really getting pissed at the record industry. And just, like when any of these millionaire, super millionaire singers, tell us to be better people or, better environmentalists, or they complain about trying to track their millions, it's always a little bit hard to swallow, Like, hey, Don Henley, don't you live in Malibu and other places, and you're telling me about the taking care of the world? It's the same kind of thing here with Money Go Round. I just, those songs, when you go against the Clash, you have to deliver believability, I think, because they definitely are, and they don't do that here. You know, it's hard. So and I believe, again, Joe is angry. He's coloring a different kind of anger in Deny, and we get to hear about it. And it's not a great Clash song, but I think by a slim margin it is better than the Clash. So once again, Todd and I prove that Jeff is wrong.
Hey, finally somebody proves it.
10-9 the Clash. Round 8. This time tomorrow versus London Burning. Good God. All right, Todd, go ahead and do it.
Oh, this was a really, really tough one. This is the start of side 2 of the Kinks album, by the way. Interestingly, I heard this on the radio. I was listening to Underground Garage a couple weekends ago, and this came on. And it's weird to hear a deep cut like that from this kind of a deep cut Kinks album on the radio, but it was great. The resonator guitar is back, and it has that kind of winsome traveling, stuck on an airplane. I think Radiohead did a song about that too, the Bends. And it has that vibe to it that I really like. There was a period when I traveled about 70% for my job, and so I know that exact feeling. It just kind of has that melancholy of it. London's Burning is, again, you run out of adjectives, but this is such a great song. It has there's like, I don't know how to describe it, but just the guitar just kind of slices right through the headphones as you listen to it, and it's great. I put in my notes here, I had a Jonathan Richman reference too. This is London's Burning is sort of the opposite of Roadrunner, because you're driving around at night and you're kind of not excited about things. So this is the anti-Roadrunner. But I'm giving it to A Long Way From Home by the Kinks.
Oh, wow. All right. Let me mark that down over here. That's special. Okay, so for me, round 8, boy, I saw this completely differently. So of the matchups thus far, of all of the album fights, I feel like this is the one where like the datedness of the Kinks and the lack of separation is really kind of hurting him in the song-to-song format, because they've got great songs, and just the Clash seem to deliver more often that believability. I will say that John Gosling delivers exactly what they want in the keys, but it's often from the wrong decade, even back in the 60s, 70s. I just don't like the choices a lot of the times with the keys when they have them do it. And, like a lot of these bands, and you have to do it because it just didn't work, but when you experiment with stereo and you have a plane flying through my head, through the speakers, then have a reason for it and make it work. It didn't work here for me at all. And then you thought it was the dobro. I thought it was the banjo specifically this time, and I couldn't see crediting on which one it was from Davies, because I know he plays both on the album, but let's call it the dobro.
Oh.
Did you guys see specifically it was the resonator, or could it be the banjo? Because they're both used on the. Any ideas?
No, I don't know. I just assume if it sounds like a banjo, it's a resonator guitar on this album.
Me too, exactly. That's why I assumed it was just kind of the jacked up processing and digitizing made it sound like a banjo. But now that I think about the finger picking, it might be a banjo. But I know he's done that same finger picking style in the dobro too. So I don't know.
Maybe Dave doubled himself with each of them just to make it even harder to tell. I mean, that easily could be the case. So,
yeah.
London Burning, boy, this is. I think this is the Clash giving a nasty cut above the eye of the Kinks, because London Burning is just a song that's full of power. It's the anthem, and I love Topper's drum. For the first time, like, Topper stands out. I don't think he's a terribly I don't want to say proficient. He's not a traditional drummer, and here it's just Flamville. It's almost like he's had a stroke mid-song, and the sticks are just never going to go the same speed, and it works, and it's fantastic. And if you're part of the government and this song is out, you have to be terrified. And like, what the heck are we going to do? Not necessarily to quell that, but like to get right. I mean, this is speaking directly to the heart of the people that are trying to do it. And it's great because, how all those British radio things, like, this is London, and he's like, London's burning, motherfuckers. This is what's going on out there in the streets. And so that normal, calm British voice that you get, it's the response to that. And I think it's just hugely powerful, and it's 10-8 Clash. All right, Jeff, what did you think about Round 8? Yep, 10-8.
Wow, knockdown. Look at that.
I know, significant.
Well, this is really, I think you guys are nailing it, because what Pete said about the cut above the eye, I had that in my notes. I don't know if it was exactly this one, but it's one of these matchups where you get to it, and both tracks are not terribly strong. And regarding the Kinks, like Todd said, like the resonator guitar is back. And my notes say, quote, the resonator guitar is back. So that's we're all thinking about this similarly, it appears. Yeah, it's a guitar or banjo, whatever it ends up being. It works really well here because it adds kind of like a back home familiarity to the raised point of the view. And he's singing about separation and endless travel and airplanes and the urban jungle and whatnot. So it kind of gives it a grounding in a way. The Clash have cited the Kinks as an influence, which it kind of makes sense. You see that. But it's also interesting to contrast what you were saying about the British voice, because the Kinks have these Americanisms, but the Clash are just unapologetically British throughout the whole album. The London's Burning, it's a great line. London's burning with boredom now. That's a classic line. Yeah, both sides are kind of running out of steam here. There's no decisive blow from either side. I'm going to give this one to the Clash 10-9 for rocking out with their Cockney out.
There is, and there's jokes. That's great.
Yeah, so thanks, Pete, for having me on this.
Good. Are you enjoying it? It's fun, right?
Yeah, it is fun. It is fun. It's a learning experience too, because you got to go through and really give each track a good listen.
Yeah.
And research on the internet, there is no bottom to that.
Yeah.
It could go on forever and ever.
It's
you
crazy.
Have to cut it off at some point with the research.
Imagine my horror when I realized 3 hours before we were going to record that I hadn't even started. I was like,
wow.
Yeah. I thought I had more time. Okay, getting back to it. All right, so let's go ahead and do round 9. A Long Way Home versus Career Opportunities. This is mine to start, so let me just say, A Long Way Home is a nice autobiographical tale for Ray, realizing, as his own maturity evolves and he's left home, he's become a different dude and often doesn't recognize himself in the mirror, I guess. And that's interesting, and it's neat. Kind of, for me, I don't know, it doesn't fit in the album. I mean, there's so many songs on the album, maybe it does, but this is where the experimentation kind of just unhinges a bit. I just don't, again, I don't buy it. Like, okay, you're gone from home and everything else. It should have been a strong album and then a crap album that were broken in half and done differently, I think, in terms of an album fight. But that's not the case. And I think the Clash with Career Opportunities, they didn't get to leave. They're stuck at home, living in a hovel, and they're flopping on each other's couches and squatting in different places. So there's a lot more anger. And again, it's Mick Jones doing what he does best. I love the fact that Mick was employed by the government opening letters to make sure that they were safe. And there's reference to that in here that, like he's like the royal taster, except for he's the royal, letter bomb opener. And that alone for me, that note, 10-9 Clash. Let me hear what you think, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I'm right in sync with you on some of this. This track, the Kinks track, A Long Way From Home, you said it doesn't fit the album. I'm not quite so despondent about it. I think it could have, with a different sequencing, because it's a decent ballad. It's come right after another slow song. I think a different sequencing could have worked it into the album a little more successfully. It's a good song. He starts off sounding a lot like Bob Dylan, actually. But then his voice shoots up an octave, and he's back to Ray Davies. Career Opportunities. That is just another killing, great punk rock song. When you're playing this like as fast as they are, the bars go by pretty fast, and it's easy to fall into the trap of just repeating things 4 times in a row. And if you don't have changes in instrumentation like the Kinks have, the Kinks have got sound effects on top of that. The Clash is guitar, bass, drums. So it really comes down to the songwriting to keep people listening, and they do it.
Yeah.
And what you were mentioning too about Mick Jones, he was working, I guess, at the British Social Security Office, opening up packages at a time when the IRA had an active letter bomb campaign.
So crazy.
That's crazy. So they've taken something negative and they made a positive out of it. So when life gives you letter bombs, make letter bomb aid. 10-9 in favor of the Clash.
Letter bomb aid. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Go ahead, Todd. Top that.
Well, now I'm going to feel bad. One thing I will say is that the Clash's politics hold up. This is from '77, which is 128 years ago, and the politics still hold up perfectly. Yeah. And you can listen to it. If you compare it with John Lennon, Imagine, those are cringy. Somebody breaks out his acoustic guitar, starts singing Imagine. You want to punch them or run out of the room. But here, the things they're singing about, race problems, unemployment, just being bored, it's universal. They've hit into that, and this is why also, aside from the really great songwriting and really great playing, I think this is why they stand out so much above everything else. And this song, just like you said, do you want to make tea at the BBC? And then they talk about opening letter bombs. It's just as funny too. On top of it, it's top of the anger. A Long Way From Home. I almost want to change my scoring now. Because you guys say at a concert, Ray dedicated the song to Dave. So I've always thought of this as a Ray song to Dave, and it's really melodic and it's really great lyrics. And then I like when the harmonies come in with an octave above and they're kind of ragged, singing at the edge of his voice, and it's really good. And then at the end, it's like, your wealth won't make you stronger, which is a pretty strong indictment. But again, wealthy person talking to wealthy person again. But I think A Long Way From Home edges out Career Opportunities a little bit, 10-9.
Well, let's go ahead and let's get into round 10. Rats versus Cheat. Well, I love a short title, and this is perfect. We got about 9 combined letters, so this is good. Round 10, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, Jeff?
Dave Davies is back on the lead vocal again. He's got a decent voice. It's a good groove. But the song is basically just a couple of guitar riffs. And those are doubled by the bass, except when the bass is doing these little finger exercise type lines. And even the vocals are largely singing along the guitar riffs. And I just want to say, look, Dave, it's a great start, but go ahead and finish writing the song with different parts for other instruments. Don't be such a guitarist about it.
Yeah.
True.
Cheat by The Clash. Mick Jones is playing a really great guitar solo. I don't know why, but I'm just love minimalist guitar solos on like the Beach Boys, Don't Worry Baby, just a little chink chink, Cinnamon Girl. And this is right up there. This is an awesome minimalist guitar solo. And The Clash, it's just called Cheat, and The Clash themselves, they kind of cheat when they use a flanger effect a couple all the time on the album.
I think of the name of it. I call it a phaser. Yeah, the flanger.
Yeah, 10-9 in favor of The Clash for cheating.
Fantastic. Man, that's great. Todd, go ahead and go. Jeff, you're killing, by the way. You're doing great.
Thank you.
This is the other Dave Davies song, so they deigned to let him put 2 songs on the album, which was nice. I like the guitar work. I like the riff. It, to me, had like a weird Blue-Eyed Soul kind of vibe where it first gets started. I don't know, when the keyboard kicks in like that, it has a little bit of that. The lyrics then sort of ruin the song to me. It's like I'm walking around downtown, everybody's a rat. They've all sold out. They have their jobs, and how dare they hold up the economy by working. And he's this great woke artist. But then a few songs ago, they were dock workers, and they were trying to get some work. So which is it?
Yeah.
Which is it?
Right.
Are you a woke artist or are you a dock worker? And given my hatred of baby boomers, it's always interesting to hear them sing about the previous generation and how boring they were, how non-self-absorbed they were, and stolid and fussy or uptight. So it's interesting to me as just a document of like how baby boomers thought about the greatest generation, I guess it would be. Now, so Cheat by The Clash has the greatest lyrics ever. You can't beat that.
No.
That's a couplet.
It's a couplet. It's a iambic pentameter almost. And it's great. And it kind of sums up everything about punk rock right there, maybe except for the straight edge scene. But it's really good. The flanger sort of detracts from it somewhat, but I'm giving it to The Clash just on the strength of those 2 lines alone.
Yeah, that is great, and I love that you said that because it's actually one of the lyrics that just sticks in my lyrical iPod in my head. It's always there, and I think about it because it's just such a powerful statement. So Rats, I wrote where the hell did this song come from? You know, and I feel like this album is disjointed. You have this kind of proto-Aerosmithy, you know, song. And I'm like, wait, that acid rock? What happened to Rocky Raccoon? Because we were doing that earlier. And it just, you know, again, this to me is two albums that are smashed together, or concepts, or someone. Here's my other question. Who's more angry, John Fogerty or Davies? Because, look, these guys are just salty baby boomers. You're perfect with that, Todd. That was great. Like, I want to get both those guys on that kind of complain fest. They were angry old, and Joe Walsh. They were all angry old men before they were even 40 years old. So it's
they were showing the way, like this way to narcissism and solipsism.
Right.
Other baby boomers.
Yeah. So like, they were like, back in my day, back when it was their day, you know. It's hilarious. Yeah, Cheat is great. It's what you want from have we said this yet? It's what we want from a punk rock band. You know, this is that kind of song. It's unapologetic. It's violent. If you want. And here's the great line too from that song, since you perfectly nailed the opener. But if you want to survive, you better learn how to lie. 10-9, The Clash. All right, round 11, Ape Man versus Protex Blues. Todd, go ahead and go.
Okay. This is interesting because I've never really cared for Ape Man, and I have memories of hearing it on the radio. I listened to it again. It rocks more than I remember it rocking out, and having kind of a solid beat to it and solid like guitar underneath it. So it's better than I remembered it, but still not that great. I feel like this Harry Belafonte kind of singing and going into Coconut, it's really kind of dated and racist, you know, and so that really detracts from the song. It didn't age well compared to all these other songs. I'm downvoting it for that one. Now, Protex Blues, like it, it's a quick song. It's like 1:47. It's about buying a condom and then going home alone, which is kind of interesting. And it has that weird kind of Gang of Four ringy sort of guitar. I associate that with the Gang of Four, not the Clash. And it seems better produced than the other songs in the album. I'm not sure exactly why, but it just kind of stuck out for me. Maybe it was the Gang of Four thing. So I'm going to give this one to the Clash over the Ape Man. Yeah, Ape Man.
It's a great catchy song by Ray, and again, it sounds jingly, and this is why I think he sounds like Paul McCartney a lot. He just gets that thing down, and that chorus is hooky as hell. And like you said, Todd, it sounds like Belafonte, and he. Here's what I figured out about the Kinks from this album fight. They are the original cover band from that era. So they'll write you an original song, but it's going to sound like everybody else from that era. And it's just a strange phenomenon with me. Or maybe like they're just the center star and everybody else blows out from them, but I can't give them that kind of credit. Protex Blues, Topper is great. Classic punk song. Of course, we've already heard that a lot from these guys. And so I'm just going to let the hittiness of Ape Man beat out Protex Blues, because when I want to hear a punk song, I'm not going to cue up this one. I'm going to cue up Cheat or one of the other songs from earlier in the album. So for me, this is the Kinks 10-9. Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, like what Todd was saying about the Belafonte or the island voice, I don't think there's any way that this song could be made today. And that is kind of an easy part of it. But the groove, it, like you said, it rocks, and it does. I think this is the best groove on the whole album. It's got good lyrics. It's a solid song. Ray Davies is telling us that he doesn't want to die in a nuclear war. The tempo and the groove are actually kind of close to Lola, but the other elements of the song differentiated enough. And it's got the spoken section, which is a little hokey, but it kind of works in this case. So they're throwing all these ideas into songwriting over the course of the whole album. They're just like throwing everything they have at songs. And most of the time it works really well. He's talking about being an ape man and getting back to the basics and away from civilization. And there's the little piano riff, the do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It reminds me a lot of Maybe I'm Amazed, which is around the same time. I'm not sure who was first on that one. But then we get to the Clash, and it's a decent vocal performance. Mick Jones again, and apparently the song they were doing it before Joe Strummer was in the Clash, but that's like saying before the Clash was the Clash.
Sure.
Is the song about buying condoms or carrying condoms or using condoms or maybe not using condoms? I don't know. First, I was going to leave this with the Clash standing, but there's just not enough to justify that. This is the knockdown. The Clash are on their butt for this one. So it's 10-8 for the Kinks for letting us know that they don't want to die in a nuclear war.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's go ahead and now we're deep in the fight here. The penultimate round, round 12. Powerman versus Police and Thieves. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. I'm going to leave plenty of space for you guys in this one. If I'm a bit tired of the same punk sounds, like I said the last round, the same tricks are being used here. But it's just a long album, and these album fights, you do get ear fatigue when you're listening over and over again to the same band do the same things. And I just find that Powerman is just, it's too Beatles adjacent. When you're going to go against the Clash, you can't be Beatles adjacent. You need to be able to stand on your own, and you have to tell the truth. And a truth that matters. Yeah, don't tell me that you're like your $500 alligator slippers keep getting stolen out of you. Like, I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about something real, because the reason why the Clash's lyrics stand up 40, 50 years later is that they're speaking about social injustices that remain true and are really fucking hard problems to solve. As we look down, I was thinking, are we worse off than we were before, or are we in a better place, or are we just talking about the same really complicated things, like how does the guy in the bottom get to have a decent living, without ruining everything else? So that tumult that he kind of sings about, I think that's always going to be relevant, and that's powerful songwriting. So when I look at this and I hear Police and Thieves, I also have to mention that it's a cover. But if there is a band, song for song, that plays covers, you do not want the Clash listening to your shit, because they will absolutely not just steal it, but they'll stick a knife in your ribs just to make sure that you don't come back and try to steal it back from them. They absolutely take this round in a powerful way to me, 10-8, because if you always stealing people's songs, man, that is tough to do. So the Clash 10-8. Jeff, go ahead and go.
Wow, 10-8. I didn't see that. I mean, I agree with you. Yeah, the Kinks, it's got an odd introduction. It's like they try out one or two different ideas before they finally settle into the groove and start the song. And once they find it, they just don't let go of it. It's relentless, and it just keeps going. And maybe that's supposed to represent the relentless drive for power or something, but it just doesn't feel as inspired or as interesting as most of the other tracks on this album. There's just not enough to it. Also, I noticed the tempo is sliding around quite a bit, especially at the beginning, which that's the sound of a band playing without a click track, and that's a good thing. I like that about it. And the two lead vocalists, Ray and Dave, together, it works really well. I like that. But like you were saying, it goes on. I don't think it's just the albums. I think it's both these songs in particular they're both the longest song of each respective album, and they both just go on too freaking long. So the Powerman is 4:16, and it should be 3 minutes and change. The Clash should be less than 6 minutes. Yeah, so it's Clash, and they're doing a cover. It's a reggae cover. I love it when the Clash does some reggae covers. They did a bunch. Police and Thieves, Pressure Drop, Wrong and Boyo, Revolution Rock, and my personal favorite, Armageddon Time. That's a killer. So, and right after they released this, Bob Marley name-checked the Clash in his song Punky Reggae Party just a few months later, which sounds like quite a compliment until we see it was produced by Lee Scratch Perry, who has a writing credit on Police and Thieves. So it's more like returning the favor. And there's a little bit of echo here. It's the second time on the whole album, the only other time that the Clash uses some kind of effect, and it's echo, but it's, they're doing a dub kind of a vibe, so you kind of want to have that in there. Both of these two albums are filled with 2 minutes or so long songs. Police and Thieves should be as short as Powerman, and Powerman should be shorter than that. So I'm giving this one to the Clash, 10-9, for appearing in Martin Scorsese's movie The King of Comedy.
All right, perfect. Todd, how did you have round 12?
I really like the Powerman song. I agree with everything that you guys are saying. I didn't realize that was both Ray and Dave singing at the time, but that makes sense. Is that the same old story part where they're singing? Yeah. And that's the part where the song really picks up. I like that a lot. This is the song I kept repeating. Like when I was listening on my Spotify list, I had them intertwined. This is the song I kept hitting repeat on just because I love the feeling of it. I love the driving beat. I think this is this is going to be one of the singles on the album, but they picked Lola instead. And I think this is a fantastic song, but it you know, the lyrics, again, it has that same problem of feeling sorry for the rich rock star. And it has a Godwin's Law in there where it references Hitler and Mussolini and Genghis Khan. I'm not quite sure that that's comparable. I really like this song. Police and Thieves, I love. It's, you know, the rule of doing a cover is that you have to add something to it and make it your own. And it definitely passes that bar and then goes beyond it. I agree that it's too long, especially, you know, this such a long album. It's like, hey, here comes a 6-minute track. you think you're almost done.
Yeah.
Hey, like, all right, eat your peas. Yeah, I don't think Lee Perry was happy about this cover, and it doesn't seem like there was a lot of general good feelings. But it's punk. What are you going to do? You know, give them some rules. And I think it's great the way that the Clash incorporates a bunch of different things, and obviously they brought in this reggae, which is great. So. However, I'm still giving it to the Kinks at this point.
Do you think that Perry gave back any royalty checks that he got because the Clash outsold his song?
That's a good question.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Jaw's work was working just fine. You have to. Jaw's going to provide. He just provided.
Maybe Ray could write a song about that. That's one aspect he didn't.
Totally. And since you're dropping the different covers the Clash have done, they also did I Fought the Law. And if you got a bunch of square white dudes wearing suits in a jail set doing a video, you know, you're like, guys are as square and as non-fighting the law as possible. It's like Justin Bieber tattoos. Like, everybody's like, that's great. You know,
that's on the U.S. album, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen the video, but that's a great one too. Yeah.
Right. And there's no doubt. Like, you just got to, like, it's like the Letterman sing it, and then you slide the needle off the record, and here comes the Clash, and they actually look like they're fighting the law because they probably have. So here we go.
Yeah.
Round 13. Got to Be Free versus 48 Hours in Garageland, because we had to make this fight work, so we combined those two tracks. Todd, kick us off.
Got to Be Free. It harkens back to the intro of the song, and it's sort of like reminds you've been listening to an album, not a collection of songs. With this album, I feel like it works better as a collection of songs than hanging together as an album. But this is their attempt. Maybe they're consciously, saying, we got to do something album-like. So the resonator guitar comes out, plays almost the same thing as the first song. And then it's like a rockin' kids song, You could picture like kids singing along with this, or being part of like Free to Be You and Me or something like that. It has that kind of weird lyrics. Even though it's driving, it's almost like a kid's song talking about bugs and being free. The Clash ones, 48 Hours, I'm going to have to say, it feels a little bit tossed off. This is the one thing on the album maybe I'd call filler, as much as you could say that about this album. Garageland is much, much stronger, and it has that similar thing that I think the Kinks were trying to do in Top of the Pops, where they were the wobbly singing back and a wobbly thing, and then the harmonica, and they come in wrong. So it has a little bit of that at the beginning of the song, where they're like trying to suck on purpose to be like a garage band, and then it rocks out from there. This thematically fits with the Lola and Powerman album. And also, I was reading through the lyrics again because they're hard to catch. It has the word gutter snipes. I thought maybe this is the only song that contained that word, but if you do a search, there's like 10 of them. I was really surprised. So I'm giving this one to the Kinks. Got to Be Free.
I was fully worn out on the old-timey Kinks sounds, and especially the keys. They didn't get there often enough for me to justify them being as prominent as they were in the mix. And I just, 13 songs in, everybody's ear wears out a little bit, but I don't understand as a body of work. I don't understand Ray's choices for the sounds in a way that makes sense often enough to beat the Clash. And you're going against 48 Hours, which, as you said perfectly, like, that's an okay song, but let's just call it not in the top third of the stronger songs on the album, whereas Garageland is a legitimate song, and it in its own right, you don't even need 48 Hours' help to take down Gotta Be Free. So this round for me is 10-9, the Clash, leaving space for Jeff to bring it home.
Well, I think Pete's right. I think Gotta Be Free is just not quite there. It's a nice bookend. It's a payoff from the intro at the beginning of the album, and it would work, but it's a nice touch. But this is it's just not that great. I was thinking this should be called the drum fill song because the drum fills are all over it. It's almost melodic in a way. It's kind of cool because most of the other instruments are just holding down the chord progression. And it's got the lyric, we've got to get out of this world somehow. We've got to be free. We've got to be free now, which is a fine sentiment, but it's not expressed in an especially interesting way. Between 48 Hours and Garageland for the Clash, I actually like 48 Hours quite a bit. I will fist pump along to that one. It's the weekend, 48 hours, need 48 thrills. It's got one of my favorite lines from either album. Monday's coming like a jail on wheels. I love that one. And the chorus is in a different key. It keeps going back and forth between keys, which is a nice touch and keeps it interesting. Garageland is about Clash staying true to their roots and ending up back in the garage in the context of the sudden commercial appetite for punk rock music. And yeah, that's valid and it works. Getting to the end of the album, not quite as much strength left on either side. The Kinks are back to their call to be free, and the Clash are back in the garage. So sounds like everyone has gotten home safely, which is good. It's worth noting what you were mentioning before about there's an American sequencing to the Clash album. If we used that, this would have been a different battle. Or even if we had taken that introduction on the Kinks album and made that a separate track, that would have then changed all of the subsequent tracks and recalibrated the entire fight. You got to hit the ball where it lies, if you'll pardon the sports analogy. I'm giving the final rounds to the Clash, 10-9.
Interesting. Hey, I was going to ask you, Todd, when you were looking up lyrics and everything, had you ever seen bullshit detector used as a lyric before? I don't know what the etymology of that complex word is, but that's the first time I've ever thought about it being used in a public forum.
Which song is that?
Garageland. It's like the seventh and eighth words or whatever.
That's right. I didn't look that one up. That seemed to fit quite well. There was one that mentioned a Dalek. I forget the Clash song. Yeah. They're going to be. It's hard to think.
I was surprised by the bullshit detector because I thought bullshit was an Americanism. I thought in England that would be bullocks or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Detector.
But he also doesn't mind, taking culturally appropriating from other places. He'll use whatever lyric he thinks works in there. We definitely know that he doesn't play by the rules. Yeah. All right, so let's first off get Rickards post-fight analysis. Richard, what do you think of what we did?
Wow, was this a close one? And I'll be the first to admit this one took me totally by surprise. And like we've seen in the past with close fights, your winners can actually end up with fewer total points, and that's what we've had here today. While 2 of the 3 official judges gave the fight to the Kinks, those scores were just by 1 point on each card. The third judge saw it totally another way, and in doing so, we had a 371 to 365 score in favor of the Clash, ultimately in a loss. Interestingly, adding the unofficial cards into play, and it came out to 988 to 988, a tie on points. But just like the official cards, it was 5 cards to the Kinks, 2 cards to the Clash, and 1 a tie. And I think that sums up this fight perfectly. It was so damn close. Looking at the 3 expected rounds for each band, both did very well. The Kinks won 7 of their 9 points, and the Clash won 8 of their 9 points. The difference, one of the Kinks' expected rounds was actually a knockdown on one of the judges' cards, which helps attribute to the deficit on points on the side of the Kinks. But that doesn't matter because in this format, total points don't win you anything. It's all about the rounds and the song v song format. On my unofficial card, I had it going to the Clash, but I can't argue with the decision here because easily over half of the rounds could have gone either way, and I very well could have scored it for the other album in those rounds. It was that damn good of a fight, and one where I walked away actually a much bigger fan of the Kinks than I ever expected. I think that's what this is all about. It had the pre-fight numbers going against it, but it stood its own and got a very well-deserved win for the Kinks. One could say that this fight was so hot, it was hot like a brush fire, or maybe a bush fire. I can't ever get those two straight. For those keeping score, perfect 5-star albums now have only won 1 of the 3 matches they were featured in. Is this a trend? We'll have to see in future album fights. Back to you guys.
Richard is fantastic with this analysis stuff. And, yeah, you're right. This is a wild fight. So I don't know if you guys are looking at the scorecard, but I am right now. And I have this going significantly for the Clash, 126 to 118. And you guys are a lot tighter. So Jeff has it 122 to 123 for the Kinks. And then Todd has it 124 to 123 also for the Kinks. So in a split decision, we have the Kinks as a winner, but by the narrowest of margins. I mean, you guys, like you said, Jeff, if this fight was rejiggered, any company with the U.S. version by putting the extra track somewhere else, who knows what else we get? What are your guys' thoughts on how close it is?
That's a really good point, because the Kinks album is more inconsistent, and maybe I was trying to tell myself that when I was thinking of it just as a collection of songs more than an album. It's like not quite a white album, but then not quite a concept album, right? Somewhere closer to white album than concept album. And so you could line them up anyway differently, and who knows what could have happened. So maybe the closeness gives it to the Clash in some weird way.
Yeah. It's a less consistent album, but I think it's also more ambitious in the songwriting. So they're just trying to do different things, and some of them are going to work and some of them are not going to work that much more because they're more distinctive.
Now that you guys have been through both albums, which album has held up? I mean, because they're both old enough now that it's not a matter of being like, they're firmly in the oldies category. Which body of work do you think is more relevant?
I would say the Clash. The Clash is, it's influential. It's weird for an album that influential to still sound fresh and still seem relevant, right? If you listen to some people who are highly influential, like Sly Stone, you listen to that, sounds a little pale, and even the Beatles in some ways sound a little pale. And this one, the Clash, they don't, and they've really. It really stands up with the Kinks. We've talked about things that seem dated in it and things, but then also things that just kind of became firmament in the culture as well. So I would say the Clash probably holds up better consistently.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I think both, and this gets to the scoring too. These are both solid albums. I'm not able to say one holds up better. I don't think really. They're just reflections of their time. Maybe the Clash, if I got to choose one.
And we haven't got all the final judges' numbers yet, and we'll get those pretty soon, to include Richard's numbers, because he waits to score the fight so that he's not influenced by us. But the total judging score, because we have kind of a CompuBox thing, so we've got, I think, four different judges that have already chimed in. And though the Kinks have won 5 of the total 7 cards, the score right now is still deadlocked. So there's enough amplitude on the Clash's side with their knockdowns to actually lock this thing up completely. Now that's unofficial scoring, but it does reflect how close these things are. And it probably also reflects the length of the albums probably being a touch long on both of them, where they could have trimmed some this is us telling them what to do, but, trim some filler off of there, and if they had to pick their best 11 songs, maybe we would see completely different albums altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe if it's like one of those albums that's only, 6 or 8 songs, the differences would be more prominent mathematically. It wouldn't be as close.
What do you want to say in closing, Todd? What else did you pull out of this? Anything interesting?
I'm glad that we did it. I wonder now if earlier Kinks would have been a better comparison with the Clash, because that was more. I feel like that was more punk, and this is kind of post Waterloo Sunset Ray. So there's, like you said, there's that ambition. The other thing is, hearing the two of you talk about instrumentation and some of the choices, and for example, the keyboards being in the wrong decade, it makes you wonder if they worked with somebody like a George Martin or somebody who could help them with their instrumentation, like if this album would just be a complete standout. And maybe, go ahead.
Well, you think about Billy Preston being brought in with the Beatles at the end, and he didn't play what I would call dated sounds. It wasn't ragtime and all this other nonsense in there. It was something that added to the band. Yeah. Or am I wrong in that?
Yeah.
No. I mean, they were friends from before they got famous, right? Billy Preston and the Beatles knew each other. I forget what the tour was, but they actually hung out and they were friends. And so I think he fit right in anyway, like personality wise and all that. And he knew how to accent that. It's interesting. Now I'm thinking about bands when they bring in a keyboard. So we talked about Stevie Ray and Double Trouble. I feel like that was not a great addition. I think the Kinks is a pretty good addition. And then if you could even include Billy Preston joining the Beatles for the last album, that would be maybe that's a phase every band goes through. And you have to.
I'm just looking at the cards still here too, and I'm struck by two things. One of them, so in terms of the official score, absolutely the Kinks win, but the total tallies between our three cards is the Clash 371 to the Kinks 365. So our sense that the Clash album is probably better long term, I think, is fairly reflected there, even though in the scoring the Kinks take away a fair win. And then the other thing is because I did have it heavily for the Clash. I was really only on my own in one round. The rest of the rounds, we were either unanimous or I had someone with me. So it's an interesting division of how we put this, how we saw this and scored this fight. It's I don't know that we've had a fight that's been like this. It's interesting.
Yeah, we started off on the same page, and then we kind of went our separate ways for a while.
All right. Well, listen, Jeff, will you do another one with us?
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Perfect. Oh, and I want to make sure I do the disclaimer. We like all these bands. We like all this music. We want you to support these guys. So spin the Kinks and the Clash on Spotify so they get paid. Buy their albums if you really love them. Go see them live if any of them go out and do something on their own, because that's part of the point, is to have these great conversations. By the way, all three of us are Tower alums, and that's cool to be able to do that too. That's neat to be able to get some Tower knowledge.
Jeff, how many towers have you worked at?
I've worked at 3 or 4 towers. I can't remember. I worked at the Boston store, number 172, for a long time. I worked in Ann Arbor store. I worked at the 4th and Broadway store in New York. And I think I very briefly worked up at the Lincoln Center store in New York too.
That's cool.
Context, but yeah. What's your favorite Tower Records stories?
Oh my gosh. So we used to have a lot of Sacramento Kings come in because we lived in that part of Sacramento where our store was. And also Tony the Tiger Lopez would come in after he won one of his world championship fights. And he would come in and fight. And so he would come in, and I'm doing a stack about 18 inches high. He would come in and buy a stack of DVD or CDs about 18 inches high because he just got, like, literally still wearing the sunglasses, to hide the puffy eyes and everything. And like, I finally got some money. I'm going to buy some music. And that was always neat to see this
time. His recovery time is brought to you by Tower Records.
Yes. And he'd buy a whole crap load of music. So it was, that was my story. What about you, Todd?
I was thinking about the time that Bjork came in. She was in the Sugar Cubes and she was pushing a baby carriage. She was like half my size. It was just this like strange woman walking around with a baby carriage, looking at all the records. I remember that. My favorite Tower story doesn't actually involve Tower Records. It involves a high-tech company I was working at, and they offered me a job. It would be a transfer and a promotion. And one day, then the next day, they rescinded their offer and they indicated I don't know much about the market they're in and all that. And I got really angry and I said, I've worked at record stores that have better fucking management than this place. And I was referring to Tower Records. And it felt good, like peeing your pants in a snowstorm. I felt warm for about 10 seconds. And then it led pretty much directly to me leaving to go to Google. So, but that's probably, Tower has been a bar for high-tech management that I've used to compare it with.
There we go. No, I remember I was in count out at the Boston store, counting out the drawer after the register shift. It was Lisa, who Todd worked with, who said to me that when the Sugar Cubes came in, Todd took one look at him and said, "Looks like the Sugar Cubes need some soap bars."
So, because it's Bjork and
she's Lisa, and that has stayed with me too. Well, and one cool thing was, like, I was working at the 4th and Broadway store in New York, and I'm on the register, and some guy comes up to the next register, and he compliments the music. "Oh, you got some good music going on here," and he makes his purchase and walks away. And I look up, and it's like, "Oh, we're playing some McCoy Tyner." I was in the jazz department, and the guy who bought the music was McCoy Tyner. That was him. So, interactions like that were pretty amazing.
I have to ask, because it's Bjork was so crazy. Was there actually a baby in the baby carriage?
I don't know. It could have been like a small pig or something. I didn't feel comfortable enough to like poke my head in.
Yeah, it's a fair question. You have to admit, like, we don't know. There could have been nothing in there. Maybe she found it 5 minutes before.
An orchid. Who knows?
Yeah. I got tickets, $8 tickets to go see Eazy-E at like the local, I forget, like the Moose Lodge or something. And I was literally the only white dude in the crowd. And that show was canceled terminated early after like 3 songs. There was so much tension and about to fight happening there. They're like, get out. And I'm like, I'm done with the cheap tickets because it was terrifying. All right, well, listen, I'm going to turn this thing off.